Good evening, and thank you for joining us to this evening session of the Growing Brain, Unit 6. At this time, it's 7 o'clock. We're going to provide 2 more minutes for those of our participant that's running late. So we're going to take in consideration of your time. So after 7:02, we'll come back and we'll resume the training. Again, thank you for joining us.
All right, it's 7:02.
All right. Again, good evening for joining. Thank you for joining us for this session of Unit 6, Understanding Behaviors. My name is Natasha Irise, along with my colleague Anna Avalos Atkinson. We'll welcome you to this session, and I am saying Happy New Year since this is the first session for the new year. Um, a little bit about myself is that I've been in the early education child care field for the past 15 years. I've worked as teachers and as a teacher and for Head Start and VPK. I held the position as TA, which is infant and toddler specialist. Um, at this moment, I am currently a quality and education specialist with the Early Learning Coalition of Broward. And along with my colleague, we welcome you to this session. And now it's Anna's turn to present herself.
Excellent. Thank you, Natasha. Yes, welcome everyone and Happy New Year. Happy 2021. We're wishing you all the best and we're so grateful that you chose to spend another Monday night with us. So great to have you with us tonight. So, as Natasha said, my name is Anna Avalos Atkinson, and I have been in the field for a little bit over 30 years in different capacities. I currently work at the ELC of Broward as a quality and education coaching specialist, and I support providers with their positive interactions with children, among other things. Um, and so, again, we hope that the session will be engaging and offer new information and probably review some prior knowledge on brain development and behavior as well. So sit back and hope you enjoy.
Yes. For those of you who have been with us for the past months, you know that we always have a quote in the middle of our pictures that really reflect the topic that we will be discussing. And today's quote, right in the middle of both of our pictures, states, "A child whose behavior pushes you away is a child who needs connections before anything else." It is by Kelly Bartlett. We would like for you to think about this quote and see what we have always talked about in regards to connection and relationship. So if a child is pushing you away, you know, as educator and caretaker, what the child needs the most is to connect with you. And that's what you need to work on. The first thing to do is really to work on the connection and building relationship, because we've always stated that children learn through relationship, and even adults, we learn through building a relationship with the adult, and that's how they learn.
Exactly. And I think, Natasha, you'll
Yes.
agree that, you know, the importance of the caregivers in the children's lives, right? So
Yes.
in the last unit, we talked about social emotional development. So it has a direct connection into behavior, right? And understanding behavior, specifically for the very young children. So I'm excited that we're going to share some good information with our participants tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. So let's go to the next, a little bit about webinar housekeeping. We would like for you to click on the orange rectangle with a white pointing arrow to either to the right or to the left of your screen is to open up and closing the panel. Click on the question triangle between below to show to write your questions, to your comments, and anything that you want to share with us in the chat box. Your certificate will be emailed to you after this training. To download the handouts we have for you, you're going to click on the handouts button, and you'll be able to not only download it by printing it, but also you can save it on your computer for later use. And at this time, I would like for you to download those handouts, because we do have an activity that would require that you open them at, further into the training. The attendance and credits. All ELC trainings are for in-service hours only. Your training certificate will be emailed to you within 24 hours after this, after concluding this training, and the email that you have used to create, register for this training. In order to be marked as attended, you must log onto the computer or download the GoToWebinar app on your phone. Just calling in does not register your attendance, and you will not receive a certificate or be marked as attended. If you cannot see us, we cannot see you. Upon registering for this webinar, you received a pretest of 5 questions, excuse me. Upon completing this training, you will receive a post-test of 5 questions along with the evaluation survey questions. We ask that you please complete them, and that's the way of us knowing what we need to do and how much you have gained through this whole process. A little bit about 0 to 3, and if you've been with us through the past months, you'll learn that 0 to 3 have been in existence since 1977. They have advanced the proven power of nurturing relationship by transforming the science of early childhood into helpful resources, practical tools, and responsive policies for millions of parents, professionals, and policymakers. 0 to 3 plays a key role in ensuring that babies and toddlers get a strong start in life by supporting their parents with practical resources that helps them connect more positively, deeply, and continuously with their babies, and professionals with knowledge of tools and that will help them to support healthy learning development. And as for policymakers, and advancing comprehensive and coherent policies which support and strengthens families, caregivers, and infant and toddler professionals. Their website is www.0to3.org. And there's a lot of resources that you can take advantage of. The overview of the growing brain. Again, it's training curriculum for early childhood professionals. It focuses on developing of children's age newborn to 5 years old. It focuses on the brain and its role in the early development. It links brain and body and behaviors. It focuses on effective neurosciences, that is the science of emotions and brain. It addresses areas such as the structure and functions of the brain, factors and experiences that affects the brain, and connections between the brain, language development, and sensory functioning. It comprises of 7 units. And the units are as follow. Unit 1, the basics. Unit 2, the factors affecting brain growth and development. Unit 3, connection to and language development. Unit 4, cognitive and executive functionings. Unit 5, social emotional development, which we saw last time. And this time around, we are seeing Unit 6, understanding behaviors. Unit 7, which will be excited about everyday play. And today's session will focus on the Unit 6, which understanding behaviors, and its focus. The focus that we're going to be seeing is the connection between various areas of the brain and how it expressed through behaviors. As stated last time we saw each other, we love that you have joined us, and we look forward to you joining us again the following week and concluding the Unit 6, understanding behaviors. So we ask that you please log in and register for the next session onto our website. Our learning objectives is participant will understand basics of brain development, and participant will understand the connection between the various areas of the brain and how these connections are expressed through behaviors. Again, one of the things that we always do, this reflection image embodies the content of the last session that we discussed, empathy. The last time in December, that was the last session on empathy. And part of our conversation was that to reflect on this picture. What did this image speak to you about? And how did you reflect? And what did you do to change your practice during the past week in regards to empathy? So please share with us in the chat box, what is it that you have done differently, given that after seeing this picture and reflecting on how is it that you have modeled empathy in your classroom? And if you were part of the session, we also talk about those of you who attended last session on social emotional. We ended about the 3 key messages, if you remember, that those key messages about social emotional is like the developing brain is affected by children's experiences and interactions with the important people in their lives, right? And that was one of the key message. And the next message we had is like adult plays the critical role in supporting young children's social emotional development. And the third one, we talked about brain connection and experiences that are experience dependent. So we talked about how in order for connection to happen, the experience has to be happening and it has to be constant. And early experiences last a lifetime. So what did you do differently? Do you have anybody mention anything in the chat box, Anna?
Let's say someone said, be kind when someone falls, like, reminding children to be kind to each other, just teaching them empathy by modeling empathy, and help them when they need help with their work. The way you feel with your surroundings, right? How open and reflexive you are with your work in the classroom with the children. Because again, we are modeling that behavior. And we mentioned last time that, you know, empathy is not something that we are born with. We taught, right, to be empathetic towards others. And so, you know, it is important what you just mentioned, the critical role that we play in supporting that social emotional development, which they need to kind of, you know, establish those positive relationships with their peers, with adults, and, you know, not just within the walls of our classroom, but once they leave our classroom. So we're really, you know, preparing them for when they leave. I have
Yeah.
someone else say they feel the same as you. Okay, so yeah, remember, children have feelings too, right? So we have
Yes.
feelings, children have feelings too. That's a very good point. And just we have to be mindful that oftentimes they don't understand those feelings. And we talked about that as well. So, you
Constantly.
know, we have to be intentional, and we have to
Intentional. Yes.
be mindful of, you know, the effect that our behavior has
Mhm.
on children, on very young children. So thank you everyone for sharing.
Thank you for sharing. Again, yes, so did you intentionally look for those moments to identify children's emotion and naming those emotions? Remember, it's good for them. It's the emotions are good to have. It's part of their being. We are emotional beings, but it's just, did you take the time to acknowledge those emotions, label them, and then let them know it's okay to feel such certain emotions?
All right.
Thank you. And thank you for participant for participating.
Excellent. Thank you all for sharing.
So another thing that we left you with last time was an action plan. And that's pretty much a continuum of what we just talked about. So in the next blank days or weeks, I am to, that's the goal. So what goal did you have, and how did you attain your goal in your classroom? So would you like to please share that with us? So in the chat box, I have a participant that says, in the next week, that's the blank, fill in the blank, I am to acknowledge the children's emotions during arrival time. So that's the goal. And in order to do that, she said, one thing I must do is to be able to plan ahead and and to be able to be present upon arrival. So anybody else would like to share their action plan in regards to what is it that they did last time, uh, the last time they were with us in regards to action plan?
I see someone says listen more attentively. So in the next 2 weeks, I
Okay.
will listen more attentively. And one goal that can help me do that is be more intentional when providing individualized time with the children. So I guess more
That's great.
one-on-one. But
That is great.
so those are
Yes,
some
so
great
we know
examples.
that we have a lot of kids in our classroom, so having set time aside for each child is important.
Exactly.
Thank you again for sharing. So now this is a video that we had last time that was not able to play. That was the social emotional quote that inspires. It was a great video, and now we wanted to share it with you. So now we're gonna take the time to see if it plays this time around. And we do have one as a backup if this one doesn't play, but we wanted to try again to see if this one will play for you.
Right. It does kind of recap what we talked about, social emotional, so that's why we're insisting on it. So
Yes, we are.
let's cross our fingers. All right.
Did play for us prior to
Yeah.
presenting, so
Yeah.
hopefully it will do the same.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yay, it did.
Yay, it played. Thanks everyone for your patience. We did it. I absolutely love this video. I really connected with a lot of the quotes. I don't know if you have one that kind of stood out, so I don't know. What do you think, Natasha?
Yes, it was all worth it. Um, so overall, it's like we see how relationship, social emotional is built on relationship, and it's how you are close as the adult to the child in building that relationship and the smiling and the time that you spent in building that relationship. That's how it's you're building the social emotional development that children needs to be able to be social as they go on to life, um, everything that we are looking for.
Exactly. And one particular quote that stood out to me was the one about, learning about yourself, right? Just
Hmm.
understanding your identity. Who am I? Who do I
Yes.
influence? And what I do matters in the lives of others. And so this is awesome for teachers. That's to, remind teachers how important their roles are in the lives of these children.
Hmm.
So awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Oh, I see someone shared in the chat a Spanish quote that says, um, the friendship is a double-sided street. So I guess la amistad es un camino doble vía. So yeah,
Mhm.
friendship takes two, right? To kind of nurture and develop that relationship. So thank you for that. That's beautiful. Awesome. So let's continue.
So we're going to go and have a poll, and to pretty much start us with today's training that talks about behavior. It says behavior is influenced by three key factors. Which of the following is not one of them? We're going to launch the poll.
Okay.
Please
Second.
take a minute to please answer the questions. Which one is not one of them? Where the child is developmentally developmentally, where the child's temperament, the environmental factors, and D, a child's family trait. So is it A, B, C, or D?
Natasha, this question looks familiar. I wonder why.
It is.
It's not a trick question either.
It is not. So I noticed 40% of you have voted. So please take a minute to vote, and then so we can. It's not a trick question, but sometimes you do try to put on a trick question, Anna.
Sometimes I do. Sometimes
Yeah,
I do. Just for fun. That's all.
yeah,
But,
struggle
but
with you.
yeah. So just to make sure everyone knows which one is not a key
Mm-hmm.
factor. Okay, which one is not? Three of them are, one is not. All right. So I think we're good to go. Should we
Ready?
close?
Yes, we're gonna
All righty, and let's share the
launch it and result. Oh wow,
oh, look at that. Okay. Interesting.
very, very.
Interesting. Huh.
47% of 32.
32% is A,
It's
where the child
A.
is developmentally.
Mhm.
5% said the temperament. 16% said environmental factors. Wow, there's really kind
It's
of like
like
a
it's
mixture.
a mixture of all.
Interesting. Okay.
But but the right answer, the correct answer, the one that is not, is the child's family trait. Okay, so yes, where the child, we need to take into consideration where the child is developmentally, because you can't ask her to certain things expected at certain age group. So that's what that answered. So that would be part of it. Where the child's temperament, we need to take into consideration the child's temperament. We all have temperament. We are built. We were born with them, and as we foster, and the environmental factor does play a role. So the one that did not, that is not one of them is D, the child's family trait. And all the other three are factors of that influence behaviors.
Mhm. Excellent.
So
Thank
we
you.
know that all behaviors is driven by the brain, but now these behaviors get expressed and is influenced by these three factors. So keep that in mind as you set up your environment, as you check to see, check the children's temperament, matching your temperament with their temperament, because these do play a role, and has knowing where the child is developmentally, knowing that's very important. Okay. So to warm up, it's a time we're gonna do like an activity. Let's start by imagining that you are in a classroom with two and 3 years old children that in the classroom in your class, and one of them spit on you. So we ask that you can close your eyes if you want and tell us, what is your gut reaction? What happened when the child just spit on you? What are the feelings that that comes to mind or through your body? Please share that with us in your chat box. So let's see what reaction we get. Anna?
Get upset.
Get upset.
Immediately. I have
Sweet.
someone that says yuck. Yes, yuck.
Uh-huh.
Pull away, right? You immediately kind of like your reflexes, you pull away.
And
What else? You're in shock.
yes.
You don't understand what happened. Let's see, speechless. You don't know what to say.
So yeah.
And maybe feel awful. Someone says feeling awful. And probably frustrated as well. Probably
Mhm.
some level of frustration.
So thank you for sharing your honest feelings, your honest way of feeling. And I agree, I might feel the same way. Now, we all are human, and working with young children can sometimes evoke some strong negative reactions. So we need, as adult, we need to keep that in mind and do what? And process information. So now let's go back with another scenario when we ask that, what is your immediate gut response would be if you waited? If you didn't immediately react, how would how would that reaction be? Like if it wasn't like a immediate reaction, how would you react differently? Would you react differently, if any? Please share with us in the in the chat box.
Yeah, so let's see. If I
What
had
would you
maybe a
say?
few minutes to think
What would you
before
say?
responding, I wonder what I would say. Well, definitely would process what happened. Um, be calmer, I guess.
Be calmer,
Mm,
and maybe, are you upset? I notice, those type of
yeah, that's like a participant that said yuck, how she would feel with yuck. Says no, still be yucky. Still be Yeah, that's true too. As someone else that says, I'll tell him or her, I would ask, why did you do that? And that's probably what I would say. I would say, why did you do that? Are you upset? Maybe ask the child, are you upset?
But
Remember,
Anna, do you think that child will be able to tell you why?
sometimes no. Sometimes
Mhm.
no, if the child doesn't have that vocabulary,
Yes.
or is just not in tune with their emotions yet, they don't understand what they're feeling.
Yes, and then also, well, will the why make it change the way you feel about the aspect of speeding?
No, it probably won't change the way I feel
Yeah,
about spitting, but certainly would change my approach,
your
right,
approach.
to the
Yes.
situation.
So the reason we ask those questions is really because sometimes when we ask children about a behavior, we say, why did you do that? And sometimes as adult, we want to hear why. And sometimes children do not have, it's okay, we want to know as an adult, but sometimes children do not have the words really to express why something happened, why they did this.
Sometimes we don't know.
So it could be that changing our questions and asking why. So the third scenario would be, what if we were able to freeze time and have about that 5 minutes to think and respond? What might be different?
Right. Right, because those difficult moments come up quite often, especially with young children. So I have a participant that says she would talk to the child about what went on and to think about it. So again, when we're talking about very young children, toddlers, for example, how would that work out?
Yeah.
So
we are going to explore various areas of the brain and their relation to behaviors. Thank you again for sharing. And through this chat opportunity, we do these activities just to reflect and really to delay our reactions. And sometimes we have to delay certain emotions, how we react, and then to pretty much being able to better guide the children through these behaviors and through how they react through those certain behaviors. Anything else you want to add, Anna?
No, I think that's it. It's pretty much, reminding everyone, like you said, that we're all human. And when we work with very young children, it can, kind of turn ugly sometimes, right? Turn yucky sometimes. But we are the adults and we have to set the standard, right? We have to model that behavior. So it's just kind of, reflecting and thinking before we react.
Yes. And that's what we're asking them to do as well.
Exactly.
Right? Reflecting. And then it's, again, age developmentally appropriate.
Exactly.
The overview of the brain anatomy. The easiest way for us to get to know the brain and its effect on behaviors is to learn about some of the main structures and how they relate to the brain functions. We will be discussing some of the largest areas of the brain that affects behaviors, but please, not all of there are additional reference in this unit that can explore to learn more about these areas of the brain. Remember, in those previous unit, we talked about the overview of the brain, the parts of the brain, and for those of you who have been with us during the units from the first five units, we talk about the part of the brain. So the brain can be thought as divided into regions. Remember, the subregions connected by networks. In fact, the brain can be divided into three major regions. We talked about it way before: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain, connecting the rest of the nervous system by the spinal cord. Today we will talk about the two areas of the network. The first one is part of the forebrain, the cerebral cortex. The second areas of the brain, which is the brainstem, which is simply the midbrain, the hindbrain together. We will also talk about the network system, the limbic system, which connects structures in the forebrain and midbrain and their functions. So, overview of the brainstem. The brainstem shaped like a widening stalk. It made up of the midbrain and the hindbrain. It connects the spinal cord to the forebrain and upper brain. The brainstem receives input from the body and send input back to the body to regulate basic processes such as functioning of our hearts, our lungs, the essential heartbeat functions. It controls reflexes and involuntary processes such as breathing, your heart rate, the brainstem is partly responsible for our fight, fight, and freeze. Fight, flight, and freeze response when we are experiencing stress. So we talked briefly from our previous about the fight, flight, and freeze, and to have a recap of what does that look like, we're going to watch a video. So please take a minute to watch the video and take note, and we'll talk about what is fight, flight, and freeze response, and how does it affect your body, and especially for young children. Think when you're watching that video, think about them.
Here we go.
Thank you. All righty. Thank you, Anna.
Welcome.
So I was going through my bottom-up techniques to reduce my FFS.
That sounds so technical. You sounded very smart there, Natasha.
Yes. So again, what is FFS is fight, flight, or freeze response technique. So we know that human, it talks about how human, we are like all species, have the self-protective mechanism that helps us to survive the fight, flight, or freeze survival mode, right? So it talks about how the different aspect, the different things that happens through the body when you activate your fight, when it gets activated, how your hands get cold, like stress, overly stressed, toxic stress gets your blood pressure. You feel like you're not breathing, you're breathing heavily, the blood, it listed a lot of things that happens through the body, and all that is it's through the brain that make those neurons and those connection. That's what causing the body to react to our fight, flight, and freeze response. So those symptoms, when they get activated a lot, often enough, it becomes part of your daily, for children, it becomes normal to constantly be in the fight, flight, or freeze response mode, and which is not something that we want them to be, because it reacts on your organs, it reacts on your body, your bladder, in every part of your body. So we don't, even us as adults, we don't want to be in that mindset. So think about children when they are not able to process information and they feel like they are being attacked, and they are always in that mindset. So it really affects them to their mechanism.
Exactly. And what
And
part of the brain was that, Natasha? Do you remember? What area of the brain did they talk
the
about?
amygdala.
The
The amygdala.
right?
Yeah.
That's what they referenced as our brain's
Activated.
watchdog.
Yes, the watchdog.
I
And
thought that
it's
was very cool.
part of our body that needs to be. It's there for a reason.
Right.
And we can, and that's why we say it's important for children to be in an environment where they feel safe, and that way their fight or flight freeze response is not constantly activated.
Excellent.
Okay, so let's talk about the anatomy of the limbic system. The limbic system spans the forebrain, and the midbrain is located just beneath the cerebrum, the major region of the forebrain. The limbic system is responsible for our emotions, as well as many higher mental functions, such as the formation of memories. We talked about that earlier. The limbic system matures over time. So yes, they are present, but it matures over time. We will be looking there for the structure today of the hypothalamus and the amygdala and the hippocampus. These are the part of the brain that we will be focusing on mainly. So what is the function of the hypothalamus? The hypothalamus is the structure responsible for controlling our body temperature, thirst, hunger, sleep, circadian rhythm, moods and emotions, stress reactions, and the production of many of the body's essential hormones that helps control different cells and organs. So that's what the hypothalamus function, that's the function of the hypothalamus. Okay. So we're carrying on to the amygdala, and we say the amygdala is it's a small almond shape that is right in the middle structure that is located in right inside the hippocampus and the frontal portion of the temporal lobe. It is well known as the importance in analyzing the emotional significance of event, perceiving emotions that are sad, happy, scared, and expressing emotions. So when you're experiencing highly charged emotion reactions, such as seeing a dog that is about to run, that is running behind you and looking for and you think that this dog is about to devour you or bite you, so that's what you activated. You activated your amygdala that is being activated. The amygdala is present at birth, but undergoes significant structural and functional development across infancy and early childhood. So yes, it's present, but from infancy to early childhood, it developed immensely. The hippocampus has a unique shape similar to that of the shoe horse, and is responsible for the storage of long-term memory, as well for the memory that are for location of objects and or people. So the being able to remember where you park and being able to remember the people that you've seen before is that's what the hippocampus role is. It helps you to do that, to work on your memory. We would not be able to do that if we had impairment in the hippocampus area of our brain. So the hippocampus developed gradually during our early years and continues to grow new connections throughout our lives. So we will watch this video, and this video of the limbic system pretty much will give us a summary of the system, the limbic system, and what each part does and how it affects behaviors, certain behaviors. So please take a minute and to watch this video with us, and we will talk about it when we come back.
Here we go.
So overall, it's an overview of the limbic system and how important the role of the limbic system in regulating emotions, and that are like fears, emotion, anger, hunger, learning memories, and sexual behaviors. So overall, the amygdala, it talks about the amygdala and its importance. And if you were to damage your amygdala, you would lose the ability to have feelings to certain things, like things that are dangerous. You wouldn't be able to see them as being dangerous. You probably will be numb. Anything else? The hippocampus. It talks about the importance of the hippocampus, and if you were to pretty much have something that was damaging to your hippocampus and your ability to for memories and stuff like that, you would not be able to turn short-term memory into long-term memory, but you will be able to still remember have memory of your short-term, but you're building long-term memory, you won't be able to do so. Anything else that in
Just amazing. Every time, we go through the content of this training, it's just a lot of information that, it sounds very technical, but it makes sense. And it's information that we are connecting little by little, because we have reviewed a lot of this information in previous units. But it is important just to remember that all that is happening within your own brain, right? It's pretty amazing. How does the brain know how to do that? It's just amazing.
So, in a nutshell, this is all I have for you today, and I will pass it on to Anna that will take us to the next part of your art training.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Natasha. My brain is throbbing from from all this information that we're gaining tonight. Thank you. So yes, so now we're going to continue on with the cerebral cortex. So this is the outer layer of the cerebrum, as Natasha mentioned earlier, and it is the largest part of our brain. It's located in the forebrain, and it sits above the brainstem in the very, very front area of the brain. It is divided into 4 different lobes: the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. It's made up of very tightly packed neurons. For those of you who've been with us, you probably remember that term. And it is where the brain's most advanced activities take place, such as planning and decision making. The cerebral cortex is not fully developed until a person is in his or her what age did we say? For those of you who've been with us, remember, Natasha?
Mid-20s.
In the mid-20s, yeah. So the brain is developing. Definitely, a lot of the areas of the brain, sections of the brain, are still in development until a person is in his or her mid-20s. So this is important because we cannot expect children to be able to perform more advanced tasks until this particular area of the brain is more fully developed. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at what those lobes have to do. Okay, so the frontal lobe is responsible for decision making, such as what to eat or to drink, as well as for critical thinking. This is where personality is formed and where we carry out higher mental processes, such as planning. So that is the frontal lobe. The parietal lobe is the part of the brain that processes sensory information. It is where information such as taste, temperature, and touch are integrated and processed. This processing happens almost instantaneously. A person would not be able to feel sensations of touch and temperature and would even be partially or completely unaware of his own body if this area of the brain were to be damaged. The temporal lobe is responsible for hearing and selective listening. It receives sensory information such as sounds and speech from the ears. It is also key to being able to comprehend or understand meaningful speech. This lobe is special because it makes sense of all the different sounds being transmitted from the sensory receptors of the ears. Notice how they're very close to the ears. And finally, the occipital lobe enables us to correctly understand what our eye is seeing. The lobes have to be very fast to process the rapid information we are taking in through our eyes. Just as the temporal lobe makes sense of auditory information, the occipital lobe makes sense of visual information so that we are able to understand it. If our occipital lobe were impaired or injured, we would not be able to correctly process any visual signals. Okay. So now we are going to share with you a short video, just kind of recap. What we've been doing is kind of recapping the different sections of this training to kind of help you see the visuals and help you make those connections. As you probably know, I am a very visual learner. So it's not the same as listening to someone talk about it, but when you see it on a video, it usually makes more sense. So this video is on the cerebral cortex. So we're going to share that now and take some notes, and we'll talk about it on the other side. Okay, so just like I said, very short and sweet video, but it does kind of recap everything that I just mentioned to you in the last few slides. Nothing really different than what I mentioned already, except for the term of fissures, and this is something new that I thought was really cool. And those are the grooves, the deep grooves that separate the different lobes in the cortex. So I learned that. Anything else that stuck out to you, Natasha?
Nothing else. An overview of what you already went over. Mhm.
Excellent. So let's keep going. All right, so far we've shared a lot of information about the different areas of the brain and their functions and how they play a major role in behavior, right? So now that we have reviewed the basic areas of their functions, let's think about how these developing areas affect typical behaviors in the children in our classroom. As children grow, keep in mind these areas of the brain must begin to function together, right? So as providers, we must keep in mind that as young children are growing and developing, their brains are working very, very hard to kind of work together as well, right? So in the next slide, I'm going to show you a set of behaviors. And I'm going to ask you, as Natasha mentioned earlier in the beginning of the session, that we were going to be using a handout. So I'm going to ask you to kind of, if you can, download or open at least the handout that is called Behavior Skills and the Brain Worksheet. And it has two sheets in there. It has 2 pages. The second one is called Glossary of Brain Structures. So I'm going to just review a couple of behaviors and what areas of the brain kind of, take over for these behaviors. And what we will ask you to do is for next time, if you review that worksheet, that Behavior Skills and the Brain Worksheet, which has the different age ranges, and the glossary of brain structures, to kind of figure out which brain structure fits with those various age ranges and behaviors, okay? So let me share with you what I have, the summary of brain anatomy, behavior, and the brain. So for example, hopefully you have been able to open up that handout. Handout 6.1, it's called Behavior Skills and the Brain Worksheet, and as you'll see, it has the different age groups, age levels shown listed on the left. And the idea is for you to fill in the specific area of the brain that is associated with that behavior. So in the worksheet, you will notice, if you have it open, hopefully, you'll notice that there are 3 behaviors for each of the age groups. So for example, I just took one behavior for each of the age groups, and I'm going to ask you for next time if you could work on it and see, just to see, this is not a test or anything, but just to see if you've captured right, the kind of the overall gist of what we've been talking about. So for example, for a child birth to 9 months old, if the child cries to indicate needs or wants, what area of the brain then we'll be talking about? So we were just talking about the amygdala, right? So what is the amygdala responsible for? Do you guys remember? Emotions, right? We talked about that it was responsible for emotions. So the idea is that we want you to kind of pair them up, right? So this particular area of the brain is responsible for analyzing emotions, perceiving emotions, happy, sad, scared, and also expressing emotions, right? So that's just one example. The second example is a child 9 to 18 months old points to common objects. So which area of the brain would that be? So again, you're going to look at your glossary of terms. You look at the behavior skills worksheet and then look at the glossary of terms. So it would be the hippocampus, because the hippocampus is responsible for storing long-term memories, right? So if the child points to common objects, the child is remembering, right? Using the memory part of the brain. Okay, so far so good? So far so good?
Yes.
All right, 18 to 36 months, plays pretend with other children. So here we figured that the area of the brain responsible for this is all the lobes, all the lobes. And why? Can anyone share in the chat why you would think that we would say that all the areas of the brain, all the lobes of the brain, of the cerebral cortex, would be responsible for this behavior?
Let's see.
Why do we think so? Why are we saying that? think about what the child is doing when they're playing pretend. What's taking place? Okay, so just think that you're doing an observation, right? And the children you're observing these children playing in the housekeeping area. So they're playing dress up, they are having conversation, right? They are recalling prior knowledge, possibly. They're
communicating with their friends.
communicating using language and vocabulary, okay? So they're using memory, they're using the fine motor skills, their gross motor skills.
The prior knowledge and experience new ones.
And experiences, exactly. So memory, they're using memory. What else? What else takes place when
They're
children?
also taking into consideration that the other person, like in this, like
Sure,
using the
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so we're using visuals, right? So you're using the occipital, which is the part of the lobe that deals with the visuals, and also the temporal, right? Because they're talking to each other, they're communicating, so they're using the hearing part of the brain, and selective listening. Okay, so all the sensory parts of the brain. Okay, and again, when we say taking turns and sharing, that would be as well. All four lobes are kind of active at that moment, right? Because everything is happening when they're taking turns and sharing. Again, they're communicating, they're looking at each other, they're listening to each other, right? The physical, the motors, the fine motor and gross motor are being used. The processing, right? The thought processing, decision making, right? So there's a lot of things that are happening at that time, and it's funny. I really like this activity because it really paints a different picture for us. So when we see children interacting, in just typical activities, typical everyday activities in the classroom, and just think of all that's being triggered right inside those children's brains. It is amazing.
Yes.
So again, what we're going to ask you to do is to just use those two handouts. Use the Glossary of the Brain Structures, which is a description of all the areas of the brain that we've talked about today, and then use them to kind of fill in the behavior skills in the brain worksheet. Again, this is not a test. We would just like to hear your feedback during the next Monday session when we do meet again for Unit 6B. Okay, so hopefully that was well explained. And if you have any questions, please add them to the chat box. Again, this is not a test. It's just something that will help you kind of make those connections, right? And so gain that level of understanding and making sure that you are gaining, that information that you need to kind of help you as the adult in the classroom process what's going on with the children. Okay, so absolutely, I see someone put social skills and what the child is seeing. So yes, everything that's taking place in that brain is triggering, right, those behaviors. So excellent. So we are eager to see what you all have to share with us next time when you are making those connections of the behaviors you see in the children and what is actually going on in their brains. I think it's fascinating.
It is.
All right, so let's continue. And so we've established that all behaviors are really driven by the brain, right? Mainly, with this kind of activity that we gave you to do at home for next time. But how these behaviors get expressed are influenced by three key factors that shape how children process and react to the experiences they have or that take place in their world. So remember the poll question in the beginning of the session? Here it is. Here's the answer. Okay. So, we look at, again, where the children are developmentally. Okay. So definitely, behavior is influenced by that developmental age and stage of the child. Okay. Second, we look at their temperament, right? And third, we look at the environmental factors, right? And so we are looking for the meaning behind that behavior. Remember when that child spit in your face, that imaginary scenario, right? The same thing, okay? So what triggers children's behavior? Okay, so what's the meaning behind what they do? Okay, and so when we're looking at the response that adults have depends on your level of understanding as to why those behaviors occur. Okay, so we're going to look at some of these factors and with a little bit of depth, and then try to provide some clues to the meaning or purpose of behavior, because knowing why behavior occurs is critical for that effective response, right? For those young children, in ways that they can learn to cope with those feelings that they're going through, that kind of, make them do the things that they do. We want to help them to learn how to cope. Okay, so just as a quick note, I just want to mention that the purpose of this unit, we're going to focus on typical challenging behaviors that arise in the early childhood classroom. We're really not going to touch on disorders such as ADHD or autism, oppositional defiant disorder, or anything like that. Just as a reminder, if you see something like this happening in your classroom, if you think there's a child might be experiencing an issue outside of the average range of challenging behaviors, then for sure talk to the parents, talk to your supervisor, and make sure that you're providing them with the resources that they need, okay, to help that child. All right, so let's consider temperament. Okay, so when a toddler bites, think about that. There's probably a lot of different reasons why a toddler bites, right? Might be to keep others at a distance because the child doesn't really like when others come close. Sometimes they're frustrated and not being able to have something or get something that they want, or because they have a strong need for just that oral motor stimulation, and the experience of biting is actually soothing to the sensory system, right? We never really think about that when we see child bite another child. Remember that immediate response, right? To say, what are you doing? What's going on? Um, so again, then consider a child who's more of a loner, avoiding interaction with peers. This could be an issue of temperament, that the child is on the slow to warm up end of the continuum. Or it might be that he has a sensory processing challenge and is really having trouble decoding other children's actions and intentions, making that child really feel socially uncomfortable, right? So it just doesn't feel connected to others. So effectively helping these children depends on understanding, again, the root cause of their behavior. So as your response will be probably different depending on what your best guess is as to what's guiding that behavior, right? What's driving that child's behavior. So trying to understand the root causes of a child's behavior requires, again, putting together a lot of information. What you know about the characteristics of the child, such as his temperament, prior experiences at home or in the classroom, the context in which this behavior appears. So again, based on observations, how often does it happen? What triggers it before it happens? So by carefully observing the child over a course of several days or time, you want to make sure that you document it, right? So it's going to be like detective work. You really need to sort out those clues about the reasons for this child's behavior from all that you know and that you can observe about the child. So it's very important to just be mindful, right, of what's taking place and try not to automatically react, but really be those investigative reporters and figure out what's really happening. What is the root cause? Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about development now. So we talked about temperament, now we talk about development. So knowing where a child is on the developmental ladder definitely provides important data in figuring out a child's behavior. So what the child is capable of doing in the different domains, for example, cognitive, language, social, emotional, physical, etc. And how does the child's skills and abilities affect that child's behavior? Please remember, if the child wants to do something and is not able to, of course, he's going to get frustrated. So for example, a baby may start to protest more when parents drop her off at school when she gets to be about 9 months old. Her growing understanding of the concept of object permanence, that things and people still exist even though you can't see them, this makes her parents' departure now more upsetting. She realizes now that they're still out there somewhere, but they are not with her, right? So you see this little girl really crying because she knows her parents are out there and she wants to be out there with them. Okay, very little self-control, again, driven by emotions, not logic. And they really do want some sense of control over the world. Okay, so we just have to keep that in mind. So again, when a 2-year-old now starts to refuse to cooperate with cleanup, it may be partly due to the fact that he's asserting a newfound independence, right? So remember we talked about those terrific twos. Okay, no calling them terrible twos. That doesn't exist. They're terrific. This child knows now that, you know, he has his own thoughts at 2 years old, he has his own ideas that are separate from what others are thinking and feeling. So asserting his independence, for example, that the teacher wants the toys to be put away, but that's not what he wants to do. This is really expected behavior. I think we mentioned this in another unit as well. So this is really expected, given, you know, this major cognitive development. Again, their newfound independence. So toddlers really want and need some sense of self-control. They want to make things happen, which often appears as opposition or defiance, okay? So a major factor in understanding and managing challenging behavior is that before 3 years old, children are largely driven by what? Emotions. They're driven by their feelings. They're not logical thinkers yet, right? This is a phenomenon we will go into greater detail later on. But it is a critical factor in understanding challenging behaviors, okay? And oftentimes as adults, we expect too much from children, right? We expect them to, like Natasha was saying, tell us, you know, why did you do that? The 2-year-old that bit. I don't know why I did that. I saw the arm is there and I bit it, you know, I don't know. What do we expect the child to respond, right?
Oh, you're a big girl. Why are you crying? Just your mom just, you're a big girl, expecting like a 2-year-old to, you know, for that age. Yeah.
Exactly. So a good example. So they are largely driven by their emotions and really not logical thinkers. So again, so even though children under 3 years old have very little self-control, they really are looking for that sense of control over their world. So it's like a, you know, it's like a battle, right? It's very challenging for them as well. So we have to be empathetic with them. So because many of the challenges parents and providers deal with in the early years have to do with the development of self-control, this is also known as self-regulation. It is important that we take a look at how this critical skill develops. So when you think of self-control, so what kind of images come to your mind? Please share in the chat. What do you think of when you think of self-control? What are some of the words that come to mind? I'll give you a second or two to add it in the chat box. Okay, so what does it mean? What does self-control mean to you as a teacher in the classroom or as a parent? Does it mean controlling your emotions? For example, we were just discussing that, right? How young children have a very hard time controlling, you know, their outbursts, their emotions, because they don't understand them. Okay. Oh, potty training. Huh, interesting. Okay, so that is self-control. Potty training. Huh, wish we could elaborate a little on that. So potty training would be, you know, the ability for that child to kind of process what's going on at that moment, right? Understand the different steps that he has to take, make sure that, you know, he has to let mommy know that he's ready to potty, or he takes it upon himself. He knows already that he has to walk over to the potty and use the potty instead of just, you know, peeing standing up, for example, right? Or peeing in the pamper. So definitely that is a good example. What about controlling your thoughts or controlling one's attention or controlling one's behavior overall, right? So think about that. That's pretty advanced, I think, when we're talking about very young children. Okay, so self-regulation and self-control is something that is not easy for children to do. It is a process, and this is something that we definitely have to keep in mind. Okay, thank you for sharing. Okay, so so those of you who joined us in Unit 4 on the brain, we talked about cognitive development, will remember that self-regulation is an important aspect of executive functions, which are a set of skills that allow us to focus our attention, organize lots of information, put a plan into action, and also have a backup plan if necessary. So a good example of executive functions at work would be a 3-year-old who's at a table during a group art project. So first, he has to pay attention to the instructions the teacher is providing and not get distracted by what else is going on in the classroom. So that's called sustained attention. Then he has to keep in mind the steps for doing the project, all right? So he's using his working memory. Then he needs to manage his frustration when he can't have the red pipe cleaner, right? So he's using his emotional impulse control, okay? Any of this coming back? Then when he can't get the glue to squeeze out of the bottle, he decides to use both hands to squeeze. And that is called cognitive flexibility, right? When you kind of, use different plans, right? If that doesn't work, I'll use this. So now you can see how important being able to control one's impulses is for strong executive functioning. And that without these skills working together, it would be very hard for this child to have a positive, successful experience with this project, which could lead to some challenging behaviors. And sometimes this happens. Sometimes we have children who do get frustrated. And I'm not saying that, we're bad teachers and we just don't want to help them, but sometimes we don't even realize what's going on, right? So, that intentional, interaction, that constant conversation, those open-ended questions, and just guiding children through those activities is very important because you can see what's going on, right? You can see what the child is having a hard time with. So next time you see a child doing a simple group art project, at the table, just remember all that's taking place, the sustained attention, the working memory, the emotional impulse control, and the cognitive flexibility. Just remember that the child is using those self-regulation skills, and those are very critical for a child's, positive interactions and overall positive functioning. Okay, so now we're going to just briefly talk a little bit about the brain's role in self-regulation. So critical to the development of self-regulation is the part of the brain called the anterior cingulate. And this part lies between the frontal lobe of the cerebral cortex and emotion-related brain regions. The anterior cingulate receives messages from many brain regions and coordinates all the information to regulate both cognitive and emotional processes. So the top part of the anterior cingulate, which receives messages from the prefrontal cortex, becomes more active between the ages of 3 and 6 years old, which is when we see children become better able to wait and to suppress those impulse behaviors. So it's just a little bit of knowledge there about that. So around 3 years old, the frontal part of the brain, or the cerebrum, becomes more capable of exerting control over emotional and impulsive part of the brain, but it is not consistently capable of managing emotional impulses. In fact, research shows that while a 3-year-old will advise an adult that it would be best to wait to eat a piece of candy so he can receive an extra serving. Remember that marshmallow experiment? When the 3-year-old presented with the candy, their impulse wins out. They eat the candy immediately most of the time. And so in real life, this means that 3-year-olds may tell you that the rule is use your words, right? Instead of yelling, or, hands are for helping, or nice hands, whatever the rule is that we're trying to reinforce in the classroom. But when that peer takes that toy, from her hands, what is she going to do? She's probably going to still swing, right? She's going to hit that child in the moment of anger and frustration. So again, we really have to be mindful of those different key factors that affect behavior. And we said it was a temperament, the age and stage of development, and of course
Environment.
And the environment. Okay, so we just have to be mindful and keep in mind. that the functions and development of the brain we're trying to help them cope with, but they're still, they're still developing, they're still growing. Okay, so excellent. So we are winding down. So now we're going to use this video to kind of recap what we talked about today. And this is a really cute video about behaviors in infants and toddlers. So we're going to share it real quick. And we want to make sure that we're respectful of your time. This one is called Challenging Behaviors in Infants and Toddlers. We'll talk about it on the other side. I really like that video.
Yes.
A lot of great information there, right? You know, positive outcomes, you know, how it's important to be consistent with young children. It talks about, you know, being mindful with ourselves too, right? You know, how we coping strategies that we need as adults. Again, you know, in the in a previous slide, we said, you know, we have to be mindful that, you know, some of these behaviors really trigger negative reactions from adults. So, you know, yeah, this person said, you know, they like the word toxic stress. You know, toxic stress, you know, can really result in a lot of negatives, right? And we did review that in one of the prior units. So hopefully you enjoyed that video. The link is there if you want to take a picture of it so you can review it again. So lots of good information on there.
Yeah.
All right, so again, coming down to the wire, be mindful of your time. It's already past a couple of minutes past 8:30. This is the reflection activity that we have for you to kind of ponder and think on. Challenging behavior occurs when the demands and expectations being placed upon a child outstrip the skills they have to respond. So again, in a nutshell, you know, what does this mean? You know, what does this mean when we look at the children that are in our classroom and some of the behaviors that may be challenging, and sometimes we don't know how to react. We don't know how to help them, right? So we just have to look for those strategies. We are the adults again, and we have to take control of the situation, model the right behavior, and give them those strategies that they need to learn to cope. Okay, so reflect on that. Think about how that applies to you and your practice in the classroom and share with us next week. Okay, some storybooks on anger and feelings. I thought it would be great to kind of share. There's lots and lots of just you know, books that you can actually, you know, read online with the children. If they're, you know, if you're not in the classroom yet. If you are in the classroom, there's lots of books out there that are great for helping children deal with their emotions. Okay, some great available resources as well for teachers on how to help you be a more calm and effective parent or adult in these child's classroom. Some great tips on challenging behaviors. These are some of the resources we use for today's presentation. A couple of the handouts that we have. There are 4 handouts. Make sure that you download them. And again, as Natasha mentioned in the beginning of the session, 0 to 3, we invite you to log in to www.0to3.org to get information on resources and advocacy, as well as trainings and conferences, and a lot of information on early childhood development, okay? Again, make sure you download those handouts. Any questions you might have, last questions that you have for Natasha, for myself, or any comments you'd like to make about the session for tonight, please make sure that you jot it in the questions box. If not, you can email us directly. These are our email addresses, nrsa@elcbroward.org or atkinson@elcbroward.org. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear some strategies you may be using in the classroom to deal with challenging behaviors. We would love for you to share. Okay, so with that, I think we did it, Natasha.
Yes,
Come
we
to
did.
another end. Again, we invite everyone to join us for the second part of Unit 6, which is challenging behavior, which will take place not next week, rather the 25th, because next Monday is a holiday. So we're not going to have a Growing Brain session next week. We're going to have it on the 25th. All righty, and with that, we thank you for joining us. We hope this was an informative session for you. We thank you for sticking out with us after 8:30. We appreciate you and all the work that you do with the children in the classroom. You guys are awesome. Natasha?
Thank you. And again, we apologize for going over, but we know that it's all worth it. And on the 25th, you know, we're always dreaming.
Yes. Okay, so please log into
Remember
the
to
ELC
register
website.
for us next sessions. Yes, go on the website, ELC website, register for next unit.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you, Tiffany.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Be safe. See you in 2 weeks. Any more questions in the chat? All right. Someone said, God bless you. Thank you. God bless
Thank
you as
you.
well.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Great information. Someone's already enrolled for next session. Yay. Awesome. All right. Okay, so with that, I'm going to close out, Natasha, okay?
All righty. Good night, Anna.
Night.
Pleasure.
Night all. Bye-bye.